Welcome to another episode of Becoming a Techno Wizard. And we're back for another. I'm sorry, I'm full, y'all. For another episode of learning about Hegel. I'm reading The Phenomenology of Spirit by Hegel. So, very excited to get back into this. I actually listened to this great podcast, Voices of VR, where they did a whole philosophy episode talking about like 13 different philosophers, and a lot of them it was interesting to hear how a lot of the, was it the 19th century, I think, or 20th century, I don't know, but the ensuing philosophers that came after Hegel was pretty much basing their entire thing off of Hegel, or at least off of um um what's the term I want to use here? Not but debunking Hegel, but just kind of going against what he was saying. So it's very interesting, and I'm very curious to get through this and see where he went wrong or anything like that. Because I feel like a lot of you saying here is some great stuff. It's some great stuff, and I agree with a lot of these kind of ideologies. But I'm only on chapter 1 in the very first section, so we have a long way to go. This is gonna be a long series, but it's been great so far, and yeah, let's just get into it. So the last section is part 42, sections 102 to 105 of chapter 1, uncertainty. And here is my description, and then we'll get into Dr. Sadler's. So in my description, I say, Hegel now shows us how sense certainty cannot be broken down into an individual essence of now or here or I, but that its essence is really all of those. He brings us back full circle with a new perspective and a new appreciation of the so-called immediacy of sense certainty, showing it as something that is not actually immediate, but mediated and reflective. If even our most basic ways of attaining truth through the certainty of our senses is itself mediated by the subjective experience of whatever I is looking at the here and now, then that means one's truth falls apart once looked at from a different perspective, a different I in here and now. If we wanted to get the same truth as someone else got from their senses, then we'd have to be the same I in the same time and space. He ends this section asking if it is even possible to get the same truth as someone else at all. At least that's how I kind of summarize it. Let's see what Dr. Sadler says. He says, in these sections, Hegel now turns to the previously overlooked role and centrality of the perceiving I and sense certainty, focusing on the I itself as a universal. He also discusses the difficulties that arise when attempting to express linguistically single items as such. And it turns out that the essence of sense certainty cannot be found in the object or the I. The essence of it lies in the totality of sense certainty, which then brings us into a new immediacy. We seem to be back at the moment an object of immediate sense perception, but we find again that singular, whether on the side of object or on the other side of the perceiver, or on the side of the perceiver, that the this does not retain its truth or significance as certainty. Yeah, okay. I don't know. I kind of like my summary a little bit better this time, Dr. Sadler. Yeah, I kind of like my summary a little bit better, but this is great too, of course. That's without further ado, though. Let's share my screen, okay, and get into it. Wow. Is it sharing the audio? I don't know if it's sharing the audio, y'all. So sorry. I keep forgetting it doesn't automatically pick up the audio. You have to click this little box down here. There we go. Luckily, I caught that early. Okay.
The now is pointed to. This now. Now. It has already ceased to be in the act of pointing to it. The now that is another now than the one pointed to, and we see that the now is just this, to be no more, just when it is. The now as it is pointed out to us is now that has been, and this is its truth. It has not the truth of being. Yet this much is true, that it has been. But what essentially has been is, in fact, not an essence that is. It is not. And it was with being that we were concerned.
Mm. So it seems a lot confusing because it's saying the it and the this and all this other stuff. But how I saw that is just like, what's now? Now's already gone. By the time you said now, it's not even now anymore. So every time you kind of think of this concept of now, that moment is already gone, right? So the truth of that moment, right, is in and of itself kind of transitory. It's continuous, but not at the same time, really, meaning that you can't actually pin down what is the truth, right, of now, because it's constantly changing, right, just by the concept of what it is. At least that's kind of how I was thinking about that.
So in section 106, which is pretty short, we're going to be talking a lot about now, but it's not really now, is it? Because at every moment when I say now, you could actually look at what timestamp there is on the video, and you can say, well, that was that now, and now he's doing something else. That now is way back there. We have this sort of depiction of a continuum of time. We usually draw it as kind of an arrow going from past to future or going from future to past, depending on what way we're thinking about it. And this is precisely Hegel's point. If we're going to try to get back to this now, we're going to be unsuccessful. Why? Well, he says the now is pointed to this now. So the subject, the I, is pointing to the now in which they're currently living, experiencing. You could say they inhabit that now. It is their now. But he says now it has already ceased to be in the act of pointing to it. Why? Because pointing to it took a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so now is really then. Or the past now. It's no longer the now. It's no longer the present. So we could put it like this. We've got the past.
That's already sped up.
And then we've got this little slice of time that happens to be the present. Well, maybe we just need to, sort of like when you're shooting a shotgun, you aim a little bit ahead of, the bird or the target, the clay pigeon that you're going to shoot at. Maybe we just need to track a little bit ahead. So could we maybe telescope the now out to here?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have no idea what the hell's out there. So that's not actually going to work. We're stuck with this process where we're moving forward from now to now to now. So he says, it's already ceased to be in the act of pointing to it. The now that is, this now, is another now than the one pointed to. And we see that the now is just this. This is what the essence of the now, or in broader terms, temporality that we human beings live in, that's what the essence of it actually is. To be no more, just when it is.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually non-being. Or it's not. This is what is. So, maybe the I says, great, I'll point at that now. Well, nope. Now you're over here. And we can keep doing this process as long as we want. We're never actually going to be able to get to the now, at least in sense perception, the way that we want to. Now, we can, say, when we're editing videos or when we're monkeying around with soundtracks, can't we? But there, what are we doing? We've recorded something. It's no longer the actual now. It's just a copy of it. And we're monkeying around with the temporality, the structure of time for that. We can actually cut out a piece of the video and stick it in over here. Great example, when I record these videos, you're watching me reading something and then commenting on it. But usually I've gotten to the point where I'll read the text and I do all of that reading in one place so that there's continuity before I actually start recording any of these things. So in the case of this particular video, the recording of my reading the text occurred about a month before my standing in front of the chalkboard. So we're able to do all this kind of configuration, but it's not real time that we're working with. It's not the time of sense certainty or sense perception. It's something that we've manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
So Hegel says, the now that is, as it is now that has been, and this is its truth. It has not the truth of being. But this much is true, that it has been. This is a non-being, but it's also a kind of being, because it's not totally lacking in being. It takes a little bit of thinking for this. It says, this much is true that it has been. But what it essentially has been is, in fact, not an essence that is. There is constantly a scission between what has been and
what is. Mm-hmm.
What is. The trouble is this dividing line is not something that stays constant. It keeps on moving forward. We don't have control over it.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, it is not, and it was with being that we were concerned. So have we attained what we wanted? Do we possess sense certainty or not? It starts to look like we don't actually have it, because the immediacy that we were trying to recapture in all of this turns out to be rather illusory.
And this is what's so great about philosophy, that I love so much. Is like people think, oh, there's no point. Why you just thinking through these things over and over again, or just saying all these, trying to be so abstract and stuff like that. But it shows you that it's not abstract. It's your everyday thing. Like every day, we kind of take it for advantage. The idea that everything we see is true. That now is now and everything like that. That what you think to be truth is truth, and all this other stuff, right? But that is a grave assumption to make. That is not actually, that doesn't actually kind of stay true if once you analyze it, once you apply some critical thought, right? You begin to see that what we think of as true, like our senses and everything like that, is really a this amalgamation of assumptions and kind of like uh predictions and estimations and all this other stuff, right? That's not exactly what's out there. And it's play and what's so crazy about this stuff is because you can think about this and figure this stuff out. But at the same time, we find science. We do other hard science, right? And maybe that's that's a false dichotomy there, but like biology and neurology also shows the same thing, right? So to me, this shows you that philosophy can is another science, right? And is another way of knowing these things. But you know, just like with any type of science you do, you need multiple points of evidence to back up your claim. And furthermore, as you learn more, right? You can then put more knowledge around what you're understanding. Like if you have this theory that the world works a certain way, like say for biology, we have an idea of how the brain works, and you may be able to test that out and gain some evidence from it. But you also need some information from chemistry. You need some information from physics, quantum physics and everything like that. So you can't just depend on one department of science or one type of science in order to understand things. You need all these other perspectives, and to me, philosophy is another of these perspectives, right? Because it shows us things like how we think about the world, which can't be directly studied through biology or physics or anything or math or anything like that. Philosophy is another mode of science, another way of knowing and understanding and learning about the world. So with philosophy, right, if you can better understand these things, then you can better create things, right? You could better communicate things. And I wouldn't necessarily say more importantly, but very importantly, you can be misled less, right? So when people say, "Oh, this is how the world works, and therefore you need to do things my way," you can be like, "Actually, no. I have this, because of your understanding philosophy, you can say, no, I think it works this way, that way, and the other way." And that means your entire ideology doesn't really stand up, and I don't have to follow you in it, Um, and I'm going down the whole tangent route, but like, yeah, like this is why I really love, learning about this stuff and engaging with this mode of thinking and stuff like that. I just find it very fulfilling. Awesome stuff.
In this pointing out, then, we see merely a movement which takes the following course. First, I point out the now, and it is asserted to be the truth. I point it out, however, as something that has been, or something that has been superseded. I set aside the first truth. I now assert as the second truth that it has been, that it is superseded. But what has been is not. I set aside the second truth, its having been, its supersession, and thereby negate the negation of the now, and thus return to the first assertion that the now is. The now and pointing out the now are thus so constituted that neither the one nor the other is immediate and simple, but a movement which contains various moments. A this is posited, but it is rather an other that is posited, or that this is superseded. And this otherness, or the setting aside of the first, is itself in turn set aside, and so has returned into the first. However, this first, thus reflected into itself, is not exactly the same as it was to begin with. That is something immediate. On the contrary, it is something that is reflected into itself, or a simple entity, which in its otherness remains what it is, a now which is an absolute plurality of nows. And this is the true, the genuine now. The now is a simple day which contains in itself many nows. Hours. A now of this sort, an hour, similarly is many minutes. And this now is likewise many nows, and so on. The pointing out of the now is thus itself the movement which expresses what the now is in truth. That is, a result, or a plurality of nows all taken together. And the pointing out is the experience of learning that now is a universal.
So again, that can be like a confusing one. It's like, oh, the now negates the now, which negates the not now, which makes it now again. But basically saying, like, when you look at a reflection, essentially, right? You're looking at something that is not you, but that is you, because it is your reflection, right? And by understanding that what you look at, what you see in the mirror is a reflection of you, you can better understand yourself by seeing what you look like if you were other, right? So I'm not sure if I explained that right. Like when you look in the mirror, right? You're viewing yourself as if you are not yourself for a second, right? As if, okay, that's not me, because literally I'm me. I'm in my body, right? But that is you, because it's a reflection of you, right? And therefore, by viewing yourself as the other, or this from the outside, if you will, then you can better view yourself. You can better understand yourself, because there is no other way to see your own face without that reflection, right? So similarly, I think that's how, at least that's how I'm taking this, right? It's like for now and for this and for I, whatever, we kind of have this idea of the now or this or I, by understanding it by what is not, right? What's not now is what was then, or what is there to come. And by understanding that, that kind of serves as almost like a reflection to the now. And so you can understand, oh, this is now and that's not now. Therefore, this is now and that's not. So you can have this, interplay that allows you to better understand the now, or whatever you're looking at or thinking at, stuff like that. So I think that's what he's building up with his dialectic, right? It's not simply a matter of negation of just the opposite or whatever, but looking at it from a way that's sort of the outside, but not really the outside, but it's more of a reflection of the thing. That's more of a way to see the thing from a different perspective that feeds back into the same thing, and that allows you to gain a better understanding of that thing. That's amazing. Hope I don't have the whole, interpretation wrong though. Let's see.
So in the first part of section 107, Hegel is actually explaining to us what just happened. We thought that we had sense certainty finally, we had a complete grip on it, we grasped it, we'd restored the immediacy that we lost, and suddenly everything started slipping away, as happens with the dialectic. Things don't turn out to be what we thought originally. As soon as we try to hold them fast, just like that now point, we find out, no, it's not just here, it's also over here, and what we're holding on to turns out to be less essential, and that's more essential. That's what drives our process of thinking. So in this act of pointing that's involved with sense certainty, as we just gone through in the last couple of passages, there is this succession of truths, succession of realizations that are happening. First, I point out now as being truth, and I realize that now is what has been, that it's not what is in the pure now in the present, but by the very act of like getting ready to point it out, I'm already a little bit beyond myself into a time where I'm reflecting back and saying this now here that no longer is, that has been, is what I was talking about. So this first truth is going to be, as we say, superseded or overcome, aufgehoben. And this is a key term in the Hegelian dialectic. It shows us there's some sort of advance going on here. And so, like he says, I set aside the first truth, and now I have a second truth. In setting aside the first truth and saying, no, look, this really isn't what I was after, this can't be the case, this isn't what is essential, that itself is a truth. And so the second truth is that the first truth is superseded, so that it's been overcome, or sublated, however you want to translate it. Is that where we're going to stop? If we were skeptics, that's where we'd stop and say, I can't do anything, philosophy. But Hegel says that the second truth itself can be located in this kind of sequence as well. And so the second truth is also something that has been. And just like a celebrity that points out that another celebrity is no longer a real celebrity anymore, but a has-been, a past one, and then that celebrity gets that pointed out by some other younger, fresher face. That's what happens with this third truth. It points out to the second truth, well, you also have been, so you're no longer what you really need to be, and you are also superseded. This is what Hegel calls negating the negation of the now. So does that mean that just like with, two minus signs is equal to a positive sign, or rather equivalent to it, equal to it, right? If we have numbers in there, it could be equal to it. No, because this is a Hegelian logic. This isn't just the kind of logic that we use in mathematics or formal logic. The negation of a negation is something yet else new. So the now is, but it's no longer a now of pure immediacy, right? He's going to tell us this. He says, here we go, the now, and pointing out the now, are thus so constituted that neither the one nor the other is something immediate and simple, but a movement which contains various moments. So this pointing, which I do because I'm the subject, the sense certainty that contained the object, that revealed itself to have a universal in it, all of this is still bound up. You remember just a few passages ago when Hegel was saying, well, we get to restore immediacy, we do so by encompassing everything in it. And so having the now, that is, in this dialectical advance, is actually a better, more systematic grasp of what we mean here. So he says, a this is posited, but it is rather an other that is posited, or the this is superseded. And this otherness, or the setting aside of the first, is in its turn set aside, and so is returned to the first. However, this first, thus reflected into itself, is not exactly the same as it was to begin with. See, the now that is not exactly the same as the now that we started with. Right here. How is it different? Well, Hegel's just told us. It is a movement which contains various moments. It contains, if you want to call them parts, you can. Components or elements or constituents would probably be better than parts, because parts gives us the idea that what we're talking about is something that we could take apart into its parts, like a mechanism. And that's not exactly what he has in mind. So he says, here we go. It's a now, which is an absolute plurality of nows. So what does it mean for it to be a plurality of nows? It means that there's a whole bunch of nows in there. This is what it means to say now. It means to gesture not just at this present moment that we're calling now, but also to include the now of you watching this video. I mean, think about that for a second. Right now, I am actually here in front of this video. That's why it's able to record. You know, the video camera is doing something, and then I'm going to put it on my computer, and I'm going to watch myself, and I'm going to, edit a little bit and change the lighting to make it a little bit brighter, boost the sound a bit, and that's still the same now, except now it's at a different time, isn't it? And then you might be watching this 10 years from now. You might watch these things totally out of sequence. The now is a plurality of nows. It can't be confined to any single one of those instances. The now is a universal. So like he says, here's an example of this. A now of this sort, an hour, a day contains with it many nows, hours. A now of this sort is many minutes. And this now is likewise many nows. So it's not just a plurality in the sense of being a whole bunch of individual units. Each of these units is also a plurality. It can be broken down further. We can say the same thing for space, by the way, too, with the here. The this works that way. So he says, the pointing out of the now is thus itself the movement which expresses what the now is in truth. That is, a result or a plurality of nows all taken together. And the pointing out is the experience of learning that the now is a plurality or a, what we had, universal.
Amazing. Love it. Love it. Love the breakdown.
The here, pointed out, to which I hold fast, is similarly a this here, which in fact is not this here, but a before and a behind and above and below, a right and left. The above is similarly this manifold otherness of above, below, etc. The here, which was supposed to have been pointed out, vanishes in other heres, but these likewise vanish. What is pointed out, held fast, and abides, is a negative this, which is negative only when the heres are taken as they should be, but in being so taken, they supersede themselves. What abides is a simple complex of many heres. The here that is meant would be the point, but it is not. On the contrary, when it is pointed out as something that is, the pointing out shows itself to be not an immediate knowing of the point, but a movement from the here that is meant through many heres into the universal here, which is a simple plurality of heres, just as the day is a simple plurality of nows.
Just breaking the same thing down, but for here, yeah.
The entire dialectical process that we just engaged in the last several paragraphs with respect to the now, that is with respect to temporality, can be done in relation to spatiality. And so Hegel's going to, for good reason, follow this out all the way. Spatiality doesn't work exactly the same way as temporality does, so we do want to be a bit cognizant about some of those differences, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's see what he's actually saying first. So he says, the here pointed out, to which I hold fast, is similarly a this here. And I pick any particular thing. So I pick here, this particular spot in space. That's not the entirety of space, is it? It's not even the entirety of space when I'm just looking at it. Or let's say we take the chalkboard, right? And both of us look at the same thing. I'm looking at this little dot right here, and you look at that little dot right there. Don't look at me over here. Only look at that little dot. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain or the man in front of the curtain. You can't do it, can you? What we take in through sense perception is actually a manifold. Now, you might say with some senses, it is possible for us to do this sort of thing. For example, when we hear a sound that is so powerful, perhaps because of its loudness or some other quality, that it drowns out all other sounds.
Yeah, even then, you're still hearing the other sounds.
Does that work for spatiality in general? Not really. Not so long as we have sight, not so long as we have touch. I mean, I'm not even sure that you can say that this would work for taste or for odor. Hegel's not worrying about anything like that at this point, but it's an interesting speculation. In any case, you can't concentrate on just the here, because when you look at it, the here breaks down into a whole bunch of moments. So he says, this here, the one that we're pointing at right there, is not this here, but also a before or in front, right? And behind. We're adding one dimension of depth. I'm closer to you, I'm further away from you. The eraser is in front of me. Now it's behind me. You get the idea, right? Yeah, I'm not going to have to go through that with all these dimensions, I hope, for you to get a good sense of it. So we've got, one dimension there already, depth, and then we can talk about above and below. So we have height as well. And then we have left and right. We have all three dimensions of space. And with any single one of these, or any combination of them, we can talk about the here no longer being the here in relation to another here. The here is actually, whatever here we pick, it's always located in relation to a whole multiplicity of other heres. So what is it that's going on when we say here? Well, let's look here and see what Hegel has to say. Here and now, they allow for a lot of puns, don't they? So he says, the here is not this here, but all these dimensions. The above itself is similarly this manifold otherness of above and below. So whatever thing we're going to decompose this into, let's not just take above, let's take the left, right? The left becomes a new here. Whatever it is that's to the left. In my case, this chalkboard. Well, that also has all these different spatial dimensions as well. So, now I'm actually to the left of the chalkboard, and you can't see me because I've gone off the camera. Right? At least I think you can't see me. We can do this for any one of these, and we just can keep on going and going and going. That's what it means for space to actually be a continuum. We can decompose it further and say halfway there. Not quite, all the way behind, but just partly behind. We can make this as complicated as we want to. So he says, any one of these is a manifold otherness. The same sort of thing. The here, which was supposed to have been pointed out, vanishes in other heres. That's where it gets really interesting. Again, when it comes to our senses and sense certainty and the immediacy that was supposed to bring, and the very certainty and truth, the richness of it, the concrete reality that we're being confronted with, it always turns out to decompose into something less than what we had originally wanted and expected. And it only stays what it is so long as we insist on it staying that way. So the here becomes something negative. And notice that unlike with temporality, where you just have a succession of nows, you can go in whatever direction you want. If we had more dimensions, I suppose it could get really, really complicated. Who knows how many dimensions are really hard to space. Hagel's not so concerned about that, but I suppose if he was here in the present, he might be trying to understand some of the physical theories. So he says...
I wonder if it also kind of melds with space-time, right? Einsteinian ideas of space. So any space, any point in space is not really the same point in space because it's a different point in time, right? So like even in our macro everyday experiences, like I said in the last video, like when you say here, do you mean here like this is only here in a relative sense because the entire Earth is moving, right? And the entire solar system moving, the galaxy is moving. And so here is literally a completely different point of here than it was, a second ago, right? Every here is really also moving similar to the now because of the interrelation of space and time. So it just adds to this idea that all these elements, all these ideas are universals, are things that apply in terms of the process, really, to take a term from process theory, Whitehead and things and stuff like that. Like everything is kind of continuous, kind of it's in the experience of processing and the experience. It's in the experience of the thing rather than the thing itself, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Here, what is pointed out and held fast and abides is a negative of this, which is negative only when the heres are taken away as they should be. But in being so taken, they supersede themselves. What abides is a simple complex of many heres, or a universal. So whenever we're using this term here and we're engaging in this practice of pointing out a here or there or this or that, whether we're doing so with our finger or whether we're doing so with our eyeballs or whether we're doing so in language, we are using this universal that in relation to any of the particular instances is negative, a negative this. It's kind of empty. It's like a schema that we can fit things into. But that's the exact function of the here. That's what it does. It allows for all of these possibilities and all of them to go off into their own, fuller possibilities, and these possibilities to hook up with each other and to connect into one big manifold of spatiality. So he says, the here that is meant would be the point. Whenever we're picking out this here, so we'll just decide on behind here. What's behind this chalkboard? Well, it's a bunch of books, and a bunch of shelves. So you pick that, and you say, hey, Dr. Sadler, I want to see what's back there. Show me the chalkboard. Flip it over. I can't do it, actually, because of the way things are designed. But you have something particular in mind, something that's meant. But when I gesture at the here in general, in relation to that, all I've got is a negative schema. What allows you to take that schema and apply it not just to this here, but also to this here? The fact that it is negative, the fact that it's not tied down to one single instance, the fact that it can signify, the fact that it can go over this entire range. So that's an achievement. So he says, on the contrary, when it's pointed out as something that is, pointing to this, the pointing out shows itself to not be an immediate knowing of that point, but a movement from the here that is meant through many heres into the universal here, which is a simple plurality of heres, just as the day is a simple plurality of nows. So any here, just like with the now that I say now, but I'm actually over here in this now, any here that I want to pick out, I'm not actually signifying what it is that I intend, because it drags along with it all these connections to all these other heres. You can't isolate a point in space or an object in space as totally separate from everything else, because that's the way here works, because here is a universal, because here, not here like where I am, but here over there on the board, because here is something that we need in order to be able to make sense of our understanding and our engagement with spatial objects, with spatiality, with even our own bodies as where they are. So if we put these two together, we see that not only can we not pick out any one single moment or any one single spatial point as being purely what it is, and having a totally immediate relation to that. We can't do that even with the grand schemas that we're trying to cram them into. They all end up requiring each other in order to be made sense of. So the truth of sense certainty, as we're moving ahead, turns out to be this comprehensive whole that we are articulating.
Another great section. Another great freaking section. So yeah, that was awesome. As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you got from this section. What you agree with, disagree with, whatever learned. This is just fantastic, man. I love this. Very excited to keep going. I need to find some time to just do a bunch of these, back to back, so I can not really catch up, but get a good amount of them. But without further ado, not further ado, I don't know. We'll end it there. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Have a great Thanksgiving and all that stuff. Keep being awesome, and see you later. Bye bye.